Good evening, everybody. We'll just let everyone get a seat here. I'm sure on the way in that you saw that we had some materials that were available for you, and we can get that to you if you haven't got it. But welcome to this community meeting. Thank you for taking important time out of your day to attend this meeting. Informational meeting put on by Bloomington Police Department along with the Department of Corrections, Hennepin County Probation, and again, we welcome you. We want to respect everyone's time tonight, so we're going to get going right away. I'm going to do just a couple of introductions, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation by Department of Corrections. That will answer many of your questions, so please hold them. And then we're going to have a question and answer session that a panel will sit up here, and they'll be able to provide answers. We do have people from the school district here. Raise your hands. So they're very aware of what's going on here in the neighborhood. We have two goals tonight. We want to inform you about the new level 3 offender that has moved into Bloomington, give you some information, as well as we can by law. And then we also want to educate you about the Predatory Offender program. So again, hold your questions, and if you want to come on up here, we're going to go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation. Sarah Hustad from the Department of Corrections.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Hustad from the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm quite certain that most of you, if not all of you, have things that you would rather be doing on a beautiful evening than coming out and hearing about a level 3 offender that's moved to Bloomington. I'm going to move down here because then I can see better. Sex offenders have always lived in Minnesota communities. They always will. Some of you may have been here for other level 3 community meetings in Bloomington. There have been other level 3s in the past that have moved on. There will be other level 3s again in the future. Since January 1st of 1997, that's when you were able to start learning about these higher risk level 3 offenders. Prior to that, there was not a law that allowed notification to communities when a higher risk person moved in. People who are required to register as predatory offenders are required to register with our state police agency, that's the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. The law was enacted back in the early 90s that required people to register their information. They register things like their address, their work site, their vehicle, whether or not they have a secondary address, and this registration occurs with local law enforcement. This is not public information. This is information that law enforcement maintains. Law enforcement is aware of all the registered offenders in their communities, and they keep tabs on them to ensure compliance with the law. Currently, there are 123 registered predatory offenders in Bloomington. As of January 1st, 2014, the last time we had the numbers available to us, there were approximately 17,500 registered predatory offenders in Minnesota. Given that number, you can be reasonably certain that one lives in most communities in Minnesota. And you may be asking, 123? Oh my goodness. Well, why don't we get to know about the other 122? The simple answer is because they are not level 3s. Most of them don't have risk levels at all. You get a risk level by going to prison. I'll say more about that in a minute. So I did a look around at all the surrounding counties. Just for comparison purposes, don't write this down. Don't write down the 123. These numbers change every day. People are constantly moving in and out of communities. So these numbers are not static. There are 2,495 in Hennepin County. Logically, Hennepin County would have the most because it's the most populated county in the state. 1,285 in Ramsey, 479 in Dakota, 166 in Scott, and 83 in Carver. 581 in Anoka County. Now, I just did the counties surrounding Hennepin. There are currently 63 in Richfield, 29 in Hopkins, 66 in Burnsville, 34 in Eden Prairie. And as I said earlier, don't write this down and don't look to your friend or neighbor or spouse or live-in partner and say, dang, we gotta move to Hopkins. No, it's not like that, okay? They're everywhere. They move in and out all the time. So there is the registration statute, and then comes the community notification statute a few years later. Registration 91, community notification 1997. It's a two-pronged law. One half made risk level assignment the responsibility of the Minnesota Department of Corrections, my employer. The other half made notification the responsibility of local law enforcement agencies. So anyone who moves into a community in Minnesota that's a level 3, their local law enforcement determines the breadth and scope of notification. So who does this apply to? Who gets risk levels? It applies to people being released from confinement, prison, state or federal, military, or a Department of Human Services facility. It does not apply to juveniles unless they've been certified as an adult, and it does not apply to people who receive probation. Most people receive probation. Most people do not go to prison. So how does a risk level get assigned? 90 days prior to someone's release from confinement, there's a committee that looks at their risk factors. It's a committee of experts that decide what the risk level is going to be prior to release from confinement. They look at the entire record for risk factors. The number of those factors is then used to determine the level. So they look at things such as what's the person's age at the time of release? Have they completed required treatment programming? Do they have male victims? What were the ages of the victims? What's their other general criminogenic history? All of that's taken into account. So there are 3 risk levels, 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is the lowest risk. Notification is done to other law enforcement agencies and victims or witnesses that have requested notification. So say a judge gets threatened during a court proceeding and wants to know when that person is being released from confinement. They can request notification. Notification can be requested on any of the levels. Level 2 is the moderate risk, where notification is done on a limited basis to organizations that primarily serve individuals that might be in that person's chosen victim pool. Level 3, the reason that we're all here tonight, is the higher risk, where broad public notification can be done. So law enforcement can notify the entire public. Information is posted on the Level 3 website that's maintained by the Department of Corrections. That information is on the website now. If any of you looked, you found Mr. Marks on the website. How many levels have we assigned since this all began? Since we knew this law was coming down the pike in 1996, the bulk of the levels that have been assigned are level 1s, 8,322 or 58%. Level 2 is 4,534, or 31%. Level 3 is the lowest percentage of all at 11%, or 1,662 level 3s since this began. How many level 3s are currently in Minnesota communities? 341. That number stays pretty much the same, has for years. And I know you're asking, okay, what happened to all those other ones? I know you said there was a 1,662, right? Right. The rest of them are in other communities outside of Minnesota. They may be civilly committed. A lot of them are. They may have moved on. They may have had their risk level changed. They may be dead. Who's committing sex crimes? Most are committed by someone without any previous conviction for criminal sexual conduct. Most people registering with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension are registering for the first time. They did a study in 2011 of 569 offenders that were convicted of criminal sexual conduct. Of those, 55 had no prior convictions. Excuse me, 514 had no prior convictions. Read the slide, Sarah. What does a sex offender look like? I threw up some rank stereotypes here, just it's kind of for a giggle, but also because this is a common misperception that this is what sex offenders look like. Is it the fellow in the dark alley? Is it the fellow in the trench coat dropping his drawers? Well, sometimes, but no, by and large it is not. It is not the stranger in the alley. It is not the stranger in the trench coat. It is someone that you know, and very likely know well. The stranger offenses are fairly rare. What does a sex offender look like? Looks like you or I. Although take some of those women out, because by and large it's men committing sex offenses. Women comprise 4 to 5%. I couldn't find a slide with mostly men and just a smattering of women. I'll work on that. More than 90% of children who are sexually abused are abused by someone they know and trust. And sadly, a lot of this does not get reported. It's changing. Little by little, it's changing. Reporting has gotten better with education. The more education, you've heard of the talks in schools where they're talking about good touch, bad touch. The more education there is, the more the reporting occurs. So acquaintance assaults comprise 60%, according to the research. Family members, 26%. And not known, 14%. And actually, stranger is more like 10%. But when they did the research, there were some offense histories that were pored over, and you just could not tell what the relationship was. So that's why that number is 14%, and it says not known rather than stranger. What is the age of victims? It's not evenly distributed. Age 0 to 12 comprises 34%, 18 and over 33%, but the largest area of age, most likely, is the age 13 to 17, adolescents. That's 33%. What's the gender? Female victims comprise 86%, males 14%. What's the relationship? So the Department of Corrections is engaged in ongoing research. We use what's called evidence-based practices, which is just a fancy way of saying research tells us what works best in sex offender management. And research is ongoing in an effort to have the best management possible. So a study was done looking at the 3-year reconviction rate. 3 years after release, what was the reconviction rate? It was pretty high in the beginning, 1990. 3 years after 1990, went down a little, went up a little, went down, 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 and steadily gone down. This is good news. Why do we think this is? Part of that is the evidence-based practices. Part of it is much better supervision. We have more intense supervision of these offenders, of this population. There's a study done on recidivism, which is a fancy way of saying reoffense. And that study looked at 2,315 offenders that were released between 2003 and 2006. What was their 4-year sexual reconviction rate? It was 3.3%. All this research, by the way, is available on the Minnesota Department of Corrections website. It's much more in depth. You're just getting the thumbnail sketch here tonight. So please do look up the research if you're interested in the real story. Another study looked at residential restrictions. And this study looked at 3,166 people that were released from prison between 1990 and 2002. Of those 3,166, 224 were convicted of sexual reoffenses that resulted in a return to prison. So each one of those 224 offenses were looked at with a fine-tooth comb. And the analysis was that if there had been a residency restriction in place, it would have impacted none of these offenses. Residency restrictions are not helpful at all. What they end up doing is driving people underground. They're not able to find a place to live, because if you live in a city or a town in Minnesota, chances are you live close to a school or a park or a daycare. Chances are very good you live close to one, if not all three of those places. So people who don't have a place to live end up marginalized even more than they already are. They end up living in their cars. They end up camping. They end up becoming a nightmare to law enforcement to use the tools at their disposal for registration. They lose sight of these people. They go off the radar. They stop registering. And that is not a good thing, folks. We want to know where these people are. This is the individual we're here to learn about tonight. His name is Darren Stephen Marks. His birth date is 10/27/65. He's 48. He's 5'10", 193, blue eyes, brown hair. He lives at the 4500 block of Normandale Highlands Drive. His background is he has an offense dating back a number of years where he engaged in sexual contact and physical assault on an adult female acquaintance. He's got a number of supervision failures that resulted in returns to prison. He did not reoffend. He had technical violations of his supervised release conditions, which, when that occurs, they look at what the behavior was, what the problem is, they have a hearing, they decide if they're going to restructure them and add perhaps some more restrictive conditions of release, or send them back to prison for a time. He's been back to prison 3 times. He's got convictions for chemical offenses, assault, and failure to register as a predatory offender. In 1992, he was convicted of criminal sexual conduct, first degree, and kidnapping in Anoka County. This involved sexual contact with the adult female victim, an acquaintance. It included penetration. The assault lasted a good long period of time. He was known to the person. This is the same offense continued. He received a sentence of 206 months. And in Minnesota, we do not have parole. We have sentencing guidelines that indicate how long somebody is to spend in prison. A judge cannot veer from the sentencing guidelines. There are very strict parameters of how long someone can be in prison. In Minnesota, we have a system of supervised release. So someone who is sentenced spends 2/3 of their sentence incarcerated, in prison, and the last third on supervised release in the community. This is an excellent tool. People that are having difficulty with their supervision can be looked at, can go back to prison if need be. It gives them an opportunity to become stable in a community, being on supervised release. Mr. Marks was released in 2004 as a level 2. Supervision failures resulted in returns to prison. He was released again in 2012 as a level 3. He's got a 2013 conviction for failure to register, and he received a 12-month prison sentence. Then he was released in July of 2013. He's been in the community ever since. He is on supervision until November 4th of 2023. He's got a Hennepin County agent, because his last conviction was in Hennepin County, the failure to register. His Anoka County sentence has expired. The agent supervising him now is Gregory Fletcher. There's his phone number. And Mr. Fletcher's supervisor is here tonight also. During our Q&A, will be available to answer questions about supervision that folks have. These are his conditions that he's required to live by. He needs to comply with required programming. He is not to have any alcohol use or to go into an alcohol establishment whatsoever. He has to maintain a full-time schedule and comply with electronic monitoring if that's directed. He's not on that right now because he's reached a phase of his supervision that it's not necessary. But if the agent deems that it becomes necessary at some point, it can be added again. He needs to comply with a daily curfew. He needs to return by a certain time every night, every day. He's not allowed to own or operate a motor vehicle. And he's required to register until, at this point, July 7th of 2033. If he goes back to prison, his registration will start over. We hope he does not go back to prison. So what happens when someone's released to the community? Well, as I said earlier, they need to develop a stable lifestyle. Stability is a key. Stability keeps someone from making poor decisions and possibly having their supervised release conditions violated and being returned to prison. Stability could be having a job, having a spiritual community, having ties to the community, having support, having a support system. He is allowed to do things that normal people can do. He just can't do them alone. Community transition is a very difficult process, and community members can help. You can help be the eyes and ears and assist in monitoring behavior where it's appropriate. Harassing, not appropriate. Anyone can be a crime fighter. We've got the superhero crime fighters on the left there, and then we have the one on the right that most of us, I think, recognize, and some of us have even been. Looking out the window saying, something looks hinky here. I don't like what I see. Is this suspicious? Pick up the phone. Give the Bloomington PD a call. I don't know if this person should be doing such and such. Maybe this sounds like a dumb question, but I just had to call and ask. There are no dumb questions. Call and ask. If you have questions, there's no stigma in being that person. I know. I've been that person. I am that person. I admit it. Who to call? Well, of course, you know, to report suspicious behavior, call 911. If you just have general questions, you can certainly call the Bloomington Police Department. You can email the Level 3 website that the Department of Corrections maintains. You can contact the agent. I have a list of resources up here that were also on the table. I believe we may have run out of some of them. I apologize for that. But the PowerPoint can be made available also. So if you need copies of these later, you can get them from your police department. The two at the top are the two that I stress to people with children or caregivers of children or grandparents. Stop It Now Minnesota has excellent safety planning information on their website. I encourage you, if you have children, to go to that website at some point and look through it. Now, we're here tonight to talk about someone that has not committed any offenses against children. He's committed offenses against an adult. But I know that a lot of people come because they're concerned about the children. So this is why these resources are available. I highly recommend the safety planning information on Stop It Now's website. And Jacob Wetterling Resource Center also has excellent information. It asks questions like, what do I do now? I've learned there's a level 3 sex offender in my community. What now? I encourage you to look at those websites. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is just what it sounds like. It provides information on children that are missing, children that have been abducted. Most children who are abducted by family members. The Minnesota Internet Crimes Against Children is an 11-member Minnesota law enforcement task force dedicated to investigating internet crimes against children. The Minnesota Department of Health has a sexual violence prevention website. They address this as a public health crisis, which it is. And the Office of Justice Programs Crime Victim Services is a site where if you've been victimized or you know someone that has and you're looking for victim service resources, that's the site to go to. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, as I mentioned earlier, the state police agency that maintains registration, they have a function where you can do a criminal history check. They also publish a list of non-compliant people with registration. The Minnesota Department of Corrections has a very good website, if I do say so myself, because I work for the Department of Corrections, but it is a good website. They have information on called the Offender Locator, and that's just to look up anybody who's currently incarcerated or currently on supervision by the Department of Corrections, not just sex offenders. A lot of people will be looking at that and think they're looking at the Level 3 website. You're not. It's the Offender Locator portion. Then there is the Level 3 portion of the website, where you can search by zip code, town, county, or you can just leave those fields blank and see all the Level 3s, those 341 in Minnesota communities. If you're interested at some point to know if Mr. Marks has left Bloomington, you can look on that website. And if Bloomington's not coming up, he's no longer here. The United States Department of Justice has the National Sex Offender Registry. We have come to the portion of our evening where we'll have a panel discussion and your questions may be answered if they have not been already.
Thanks to Sarah. All right, we're going to start our panel discussion. Coming up there is Commander Kevin Herman. He oversees our investigations unit. Commander Mike Hartley, who's in charge of our crime prevention unit. He's the commander there. Also, we're going to have Dana Fedema from Hennepin County Probation, and then Sarah's going to sit in also. And again, we're going to have a couple folks running around with microphones. Commander Dave Olmstead and Sergeant Damon Bitney from our crime prevention unit. Dave's in our patrol unit. He's our night patrol commander. And also, too, once we're done with the panel discussion, Kim Zapar, wave Kim, she's from our crime prevention unit, and she oversees our Neighborhood Watch program. So it's a great opportunity for anyone to sign up for Neighborhood Watch. You'll have information for that. And also, too, our Everbridge notification system, which is our crime alerts and our community notification system. So something like this would come out on that. So I would encourage all of you to see her and sign up for that. Also, too, we have Jerry Wakowitz back there. He's in our crime prevention unit, our newest member. Carrie Nolden. She is our school liaison officer at Jefferson High School. And I'm Deputy Chief Rick Hart, if I didn't introduce myself before. So we're going to try to limit our questions to about 20 minutes. It doesn't mean we're going to go away. It's just for the panel discussion. And we'll all be around afterwards to answer any other questions one-on-one that people may have. George Harms is our predatory offender detective. So he's the one that oversees all of these predatory offenders in our town. And Marty Early back there, he's our crimes against persons supervisor. So with that, we're going to go ahead and if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll have either Dave or Damon come over and get your question from you. Okay?
Before we start, I'd like to talk just a little bit about what we do as the police department that will probably stem a few of the questions. Can you hear that? Better? Sorry about that. I'm Commander Kevin Herman. I run the investigative unit for the police department, and I think before we get started, I'd just like to explain a little bit about the program and what happens when we get an offender that moves into the city of Bloomington. We've got a pretty aggressive program. It comes through the Crimes Against Persons Detective Unit, staffed by Sergeant Marty Early. When we get a predatory offender, we all look at it as investigators and we send it immediately to Detective George Harms, who's in the back of the room. When we're all done with this, all of the police officers are going to stick around, so if you want some one-on-one time, if you have a specific question, we'll be happy to sit and talk with you about any concerns that you have. When we get a level 2 or 3 offender, George goes out immediately, knocks on the door, and starts verifying the information. A number of times we've had offenders say, hey, look, man, I've been a level 2 or I've been a level 3 for 10 years. I've been living in this other city and nobody has ever come check on me. That's what we do. We're going to check on you one time in your birth month and then another time in your half birthday month. So twice a year, we're checking in personally with them, and it may be even more. If it's somebody that's got a boogeyman type of offender, we're going to check on them more often. We're going to try to balance it so that we don't get accused of harassing them. But we take this very seriously. We want them to know that we're checking on them. We're concerned that all of the information is correct. We want to make sure that everybody in the patrol unit knows if you dyed your hair, if you shaved your beard, if all of a sudden you've gone on a diet and you've lost 30 pounds. So we stay on them. George has actually had a number of people say, well, look, if you're going to come check on me that often, I'm not going to live here. The rent is high. I don't like this job, and they move on. Oftentimes before the paperwork is even returned to the DOC. He had one last week where he knocked on the door to verify the information, and the offender's dad answered, you know what, that's my kid. He doesn't live here. He's trying to find housing, and he's trying to make his way through. I'll tell him to change that information with the BCA, and so we stem some problems before they even get started there. When this particular guy came in, level 3s are unusual. We don't have any living in the city right now. So when this one came in, everybody at the police department took a good look at this. It was very unique to me in that the offense was in 1992. I was a rookie here at the police department, and I'm now, getting close to looking at retirement. I didn't have kids at the time, and I'm taking them both to college next year. So I take a look at this offense. The offense was in 92. It was an acquaintance, an adult acquaintance of his, and since then he's had just violation problems. He can't go with the program, get his paperwork in, and he just has problems going with the flow and getting the paperwork done, doing what he needs to do to get through his probation. So that's where we stand at the police department. We do take this very seriously, and as soon as one comes in, we make sure that we introduce ourselves personally. There's a welcoming committee that stops in, and that's where we go from there. And with that, would you like to talk? Or would you rather just do questions?
Sure, maybe just do questions.
Okay, with that, we'll leave it to questions. If you have a question to answer, please just raise your hand and we'll have a microphone come to you.
Thank you. We live directly behind the assisted living house that he's in. We saw him when we were eating dinner, smoking out by our fence. How does it make sense to have a Class 3 sexual offender move into an assisted living house where you have vulnerable adults? And what are the licensing requirements for both of those?
You want to?
So the question is, hold on.
The question is, what are the requirements for to house somebody like that? What are the supervision requirements? And that's an assisted living place. There are vulnerable adults in wheelchair with dementia, and females as well as males. And how does that make sense to move an offender into assisted living? I would imagine the licensing requirements would be in conflict.
There is licensing in place, and it's the best possible option for this person at this time.
Yeah, it might be the best for him, but how about the residents of that house? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me when you have females with dementia and to move a predator in there.
I understand your concern and that it doesn't seem to make sense. He is under supervision. He's not allowed to be alone, and he is watched.
We live directly behind there. We see the level of, we see people sitting out on the balcony that is right above calling for an attendant for up to half an hour, 40 minutes, and the attendant doesn't come out. So the level of supervision for the assisted living people is sketchy. I cannot imagine he's under real close scrutiny.
Well, he is under supervision. He is under intense supervised release conditions, sir. So I understand you're concerned. Yep. And that may be something that supervision wants to look at.
Okay, you said first of all that.
Can you hold on until we get a microphone for you? Thank you.
You said at this point in time that he's not wearing any sort of ankle monitoring system. And so with what that individual, that man said, he's obviously not under that close a supervision. So what's to prevent him from leaving the area, going someplace and doing something else, and then coming back?
He's not allowed to leave. He's not allowed to leave without someone with him. He's got a schedule that's been filed. He has to adhere to a strict schedule. He can't just walk out on his own.
He also doesn't follow rules or regulations. What makes you ensure that he's going to follow any rules or regulations now at this late stage of the game?
Well, that's a good question that you ask. If he takes it upon himself to walk out, the alarm bells will go off. The police department will be notified, the agent will be notified, he'd be violated for that behavior.
How do you know that he's not wearing a monitoring system?
Because there's staff in the facility 24/7, and they know to alert the supervising agent and the police department.
For clarity, define supervised, 24 hours. Does that mean it's a trained person who supervises him when he goes somewhere? Maybe the clarity might help us.
Sure. So the question is define supervision, define supervised. So there's two parts to that. There's staff in the transitional housing that are there 24/7. He is also on supervision by Hennepin County. So he's on what's called intensive supervised release. So there's an agent overseeing his supervision conditions as well as staff in the place where he is in transitional housing. And Ms. Fedema may want to answer some of that as well.
He's on intensive supervised release, which is for level 3s as a 6-phase program. He's on the 3rd phase of that program based on the amount of time he has been out in the community. It's just a natural step down of the restrictions and the amount of times that they're seen in the community. He's on phase 3 of the program. He enters the 4th phase on September 4th. He'll be in that phase for 2 months, completing the 1st year of the program. And at that point, he'd be put on phase 5. That's for 3 years, and phase 6 is the remainder of his time up to, I believe, 2023.
Right.
The only reason why he'd be removed from intensive supervised release is if he received a level reduction and was no longer a level 3. During the 3rd phase of the program, he's seen weekly, in person, face-to-face. Those are unannounced visits, but they also do include office visits at times. People are seen at work and in the community as well. He has a curfew. The curfew is 10:30 p.m. to 6 a.m., if that helps you. And during the 4th phase of the program, he's seen biweekly. During the 5th phase of the program, he's also seen biweekly, and he's seen monthly during the 6th phase. There's also requirements for drug and alcohol testing. I'm trying to think of any other basic pieces of information that'd be helpful. I know there's some more questions, so maybe there are specifics.
And try to remember, too, that his offense occurred in 1991. He has not committed a sex offense since then. He's had difficulty with supervised release conditions, but he has not committed a sex offense. He could have been done with his registration, done completely, but he had a conviction that sent him to prison, and he had some supervised release violations that made the Department of Corrections take a fresh look at him. But he has not committed a sex offense. since 1991.
Okay, so I live in the neighborhood. I have my girlfriend and my mom running a lot in that neighborhood. The question that I have for you is, when you talk about supervised when he leaves his apartment, who supervises him? Can he go to the grocery store, take a walk by himself?
When he leaves, he's with someone supervised from the facility, not from corrections, although his agent might meet with him obviously in the community or out and about. He has to basically notify his agent whenever he leaves and when he returns, so his agent's aware of his whereabouts. But like I said, we're in a later phase of the program, so I'm not trying to say, if people don't do what they're supposed to do, that's why we issue warrants and we take people into custody.
I have one other question quickly. You said his last offense for sexual predator or whatever was in 92. Since then, you said he's been back to prison multiple times. So from 92 to present day, how long has he spent outside of prison? Because it seems that he went back 3 or 4 different times, including a 206-month sentence. So therefore, that's telling me that he's only been out for a very short time in periods and gone back.
This time he's been out since July 2013 without incident. He's been in the community since July 2013. The only thing different is now he's in Bloomington. He's been in and out of prison several times. He's spent a fair amount of time in the community. But yes, he has gone back to prison for supervised release violations. They're not years and years long sentences. Supervised release violations generally require someone to be back in prison for a few months. Does that answer your question? Oh, okay, good.
Hi, I live nearby and I see what's happening. When Terry was talking about, I know exactly what's happening. When those people going on a balcony, which is on a backyard, I would say they're not going to be supervised. First of all, they're swearing, they're talking very loud, they're making strange noises, and I don't believe a supervisor would be there would allow them to do this. Number two, they're approximately 6 or 7 feet high from the ground. For him to jump out of the balcony wouldn't be not a big deal. He's a young man. When we're talking about concern about the gentleman leaving the facility without supervision, because I don't believe the supervision is there, as you say. Perhaps what you know, people, you might indicate that you're watching very closely. You're not. You're only reacting what the neighbor's going to tell you. You're doing your own supervision, but this gentleman, I would say, he's not being supervised very closely.
Sir, if you have concerns about disturbances at the house, I wasn't clear if you are saying that he is creating disturbances or if people who live in the house in general are being disturbing. But if there are disturbances that are causing concern, then you need to let law enforcement know. Okay, so I'm not understanding your question very well then. Can you please rephrase it for me? I appreciate that. Thank you.
I believe what he's alluding to is just the level of supervision that because there's so much disruption that comes from that particular home around to the neighbors that surround it, that there's a concern that if there was adequate supervision, that the neighbors wouldn't be experiencing that would probably be kept a little bit more under control. So what we're saying is that we're concerned about the level of supervision that actually occurs.
In general, at the house or for this individual?
At the house in general.
Okay.
You're painting a picture that he's going to be supervised. That you have low-level people that churn in and out of there, and half the time they're out on the balcony smoking and on the phone and not paying attention to the patients that are there. If he leaves the ground, they can't leave that house. So his supervision is going to be very marginal at best. And you're painting a picture that it's going to be some oversight, and it's just not there.
Well, sir, I can't speak to the level of supervision that other people are receiving at the house. I can't speak to what goes on with other people there. I can speak about this individual, Mr. Darren Stephen Marks, and the fact that he is on supervision and that he is not he's not able to, excuse me, and that he's not able to leave the house alone. Okay? That's what I can tell
Not
you.
leave the house alone or not leave the yard alone?
Not leave the yard. Yep. Yep. And if you're seeing that, if you're seeing that he's doing something without someone watching him, call his agent. That's a supervision question that Hennepin County can address. Whoa, sorry. Thank you.
It would seem to me that there would be...
Sir, let's wait for people with the microphones, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you share a little bit more about what triggered the increase from level 2 to level 3 for this individual?
Sure. The supervised release violations that he had were concerning. One was that he did not complete sex offender treatment that was required. Another was for use of chemicals. Those types of violations are very concerning to the Department of Corrections. If someone is required to complete sex offender programming and they're just not able to do it, then they're going to be looked at. If someone gets returned to prison for use or possession of chemicals, that's a concern. He was using chemicals during his offense. So that is a risk factor for this gentleman. Chemicals are a risk factor. So those types of violations combined raise red flags. Yep. Anytime someone comes back to prison, their risk level is reviewed as a matter of course. But certain violations are really going to raise some red flags. So that's why his risk level went up, because he was reviewed when he came back to prison, and it was decided that he was exhibiting behavior saying that he was willing to take a risk to use chemicals, and for whatever reason, he was unable to complete sex offender programming. I will say that even someone who has been to sex offender programming and has not completed is at a decreased risk to reoffend. Research has shown that people that engage in a course of sex offender programming, whether they complete it or not, learn some tools to keep them from reoffending. And there's been extensive research on that subject.
You said that these offenders are required to have a stable lifestyle. So can you explain to us what his stability conditions are?
Anybody on intensive supervised release is required to have 40 hours of we call productive time. It can be a combination of employment, school, programming, such as treatment, that kind of thing. And that's our goal, is to reach that 40 hours. On occasion, we also include volunteering when people have difficulty being employed, because what we're trying to do is to wrap as much pro-social activity into someone's life to improve their chances of not recidivating.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
What is his?
What are his conditions?
That is his condition. That's a standard condition for anyone on intensive.
What is he doing to meet those conditions?
Specifically for him.
Yeah.
He is, I think, I know there's a little trouble with what I can say and can't. I think I can, without violating federal law, which is always my goal, I think I can tell you that we're working to get him back employed. He's in a time of transition himself, you can imagine, based on his location. And we're working to get him back employed where he was previously employed, and also back into programming. So he's in a time of transition where we're working to get him back up to where, he has previously been involved. But that's our goal, and that we believe is realistic.
Quick question. My girlfriend is visually impaired, can't see light or day or nothing. She walks in the neighborhood. We live on Normandale Highlands. She has, her only capacity to see is her white cane.
Gotcha.
And so you put a predator in the neighborhood. Now you say he can't leave the yard unsupervised. How is that reassuring to me and to her that she's going to be safe to walk in the neighborhood?
Well, one thing that it might be helpful for you to remember is this person does not have a pattern of sexually assaulting strangers. The person that he assaulted was someone that he knew and knew well. He's not displayed any offense behavior against a stranger.
I just would like to add, what I would encourage everyone to do with your family, your loved ones, everyone in your life, is to consider the risk of everyone in the community. We obviously only know of a certain percentage of people who have offended in a violent way, and I would encourage you to use the same type of safety planning you would regardless if this person was here or not. Because I think that's your best course of action, to tell you the truth.
If I could just add something to that real quick. I think one thing that people need to realize is that when we talk about, we question whether the level of supervision is adequate or not, and I think everybody has a right. Look, I live in this community as well. This guy on a slow walk could be in my front yard in about 15 minutes. What I would tell you is use the resources of the police department. If you've got nuisance calls that are going on at this place, that's why we've got a great crime prevention unit. Use those resources. When you talk about, what you should look out for, keep in mind, folks, you've got a good gathering here tonight. I would imagine a lot of you come from right around the area where this person lived or will be living. We mailed out nearly 4,000 envelopes last Tuesday. So what you got in the mail, people in a mile every way of that residence received what you got in the mail. So not only are you keeping your eyes out for this guy walking down the street unsupervised, and then, like the panel said, give the police a call, and guess what? The problem's solved. He's violated, and he's gone. But there's 3,500 other people out there who have got this information, and they're your neighbors. They go to church with you. They're working with it. They're keeping their eyes out as well. So I would encourage. We have plenty of other group homes in Bloomington, and guess what? We have problems with them, and we deal with them. And sometimes they, if they are in violation, they've got to correct the problem. So this gentleman, make sure you're calling the police. If you're concerned about your girlfriend, that's just, everybody's going to have to keep their eyes out just a little bit more. But we should be doing that anyway. Everybody should be vigilant anyway. It's where we're at and the times we live in. So I understand the concern. But like I said, use the resources of the police department, and like I said, I think we're in a real good place.
And with that, I'll just follow up. I'm the supervisor in charge of the crime prevention unit, so based on the concerns that I've heard today regarding that facility, we'll make contact with them. I don't know if you as individuals actually have. I can't imagine that the owner's there 24 hours a day. They rely on staffing and those types of stuff. We'll make sure that your concerns are addressed to them, and we'll try to work with them to see if we can fix some of these issues that you guys have raised, so in addition.
And I know that we're here tonight to talk about this particular individual having come to Bloomington, but it's very tempting to focus on this individual as being the problem that has suddenly arrived in Bloomington. That's not the reality of the situation, as everyone's been saying. Focus generally on safety. Heighten your awareness generally on safety. This meeting serves as a good flashpoint for people to start talking about safety and start planning for safety. It's not necessarily this individual that is going to be the issue that's going to create a crime wave suddenly in your beautiful, wonderful community. You're here tonight, we're all here tonight because the law allows us to have this meeting so that you can learn about this one individual. Don't focus on this one individual, please. I know it's tempting. I know it's very tempting. I know it's very concerning to hear that he's moved here. But he is not necessarily the issue. They're everywhere. As I pointed out in the beginning of my slide, most people haven't even registered yet. Most people registering are registering for the first time. The most dangerous offenders are the ones that haven't been caught yet. That's why these meetings are helpful. That's why this process is helpful. to raise awareness, to heighten awareness, not to frighten you, but to help you create safety planning and take steps for community safety, because community safety is the goal.
I have one point in question. We have confidence in the police department here. Speaking for my family and I, if we needed you guys were there. It's a vote of confidence with the police department. Obviously, the community has concerns about the level of supervision of this business. And what you're hearing is this cuts to the core to us as family, the safety of our family members and our children. So just from our end, it cuts to our core of feeling safe in our community. That's why you're hearing an emotional response.
Thank you, that's very understandable, yes.
I'm curious as to how or who decided that he should come into this community. Who signed off on this?
Sure. Okay. He was placed at that facility by Hennepin County, not by corrections per se, but a Hennepin County entity. It was trying to assist him, but it was a placement that we would have endorsed had we been in charge of that placement based on its ability to assist him and then also for transition.
You said Hennepin County, what department, organization, whatever?
That was a multifaceted team of people trying. There's a team that operates out of Hennepin County Medical Center that is multifaceted. There's like a county attorney on it, there's social workers on it. I don't remember the name because they all usually have an acronym that I can't remember, so I apologize. But it's a Hennepin County team to basically place difficult to place people that have multiple issues.
So this is the committee that does this?
Well, in this case, I'm sorry. In this case it was. It isn't always that way, obviously.
And every option is looked at, and it's not, I understand, the best possible option for you folks that live in the neighborhood. I know it's dismaying, but they look hard at everything that they can and try and find the best possible place for someone to live. And remember, it's transitional housing, folks.
I would just like to add to that, and I'm going to do my darndest to not violate federal law either. 2005, I gave out the full vehicle description and the license plate of an offender because I thought it was pertinent information, and I got in big trouble for that. This guy was placed in a group home. We all know that, and all I can tell you is he's got more in common with his fellow residents than he does with you all. Okay? I mean, read into that what you want, but it's not just a case of, here's a guy straight from prison, failing prison, where do we put him? We'll put him in this group home. He's there for a variety of reasons, okay?
I share the view that there's a gross overestimation of the amount of supervision in this group home. I too live very near it. I have two questions. My first question is, was the number of police calls regarding this facility considered? I happen to be very closely aware of 3 calls that were made to the police reporting issues in this home, and I can't imagine the 3 I'm aware of are the only police calls that were made around this home. I would imagine some of my neighbors here might be aware of some. Were those considered when this gentleman was placed in a home that was deemed to have adequate supervision? That's my first question. And my second question is, if someone were to have a concern about Hennepin County's lack of supervision of this home, this perhaps would go to the police officers. Would there be another resource where such concerns could be expressed? I've spoken to Hennepin County once and was basically told this is what we're doing. Is there another resource to express concern as a homeowner that while the police are very responsive to concerns, the problems are not getting solved? And I believe this is one of them. So the 2 questions are, was it considered, and where could someone turn?
I can't answer the one about the supervision. I'll pass the mic when it comes to that. But what I will say is, I think I touched on it earlier, if you've got concerns about supervision, I think that would imply then that we've got people that are under certain mandates in that group home that aren't following those mandates. And so I would start with the police department. And again, if you ever call someplace, especially a city or county entity, and you leave without your question answered, I mean, I hate to say I work for, but you need to keep calling, or you need to call somebody else, or call somebody's supervisor. But what I would answer your second question, I would start with the police department. I would just say, look, we think because of a lack of supervision here, it's going to lead to nuisance calls. It's going to lead to potentially somebody violating one of the parameters of their probation and why they're in that home in the first place. So start with them. And again, we're very fortunate, I hate to honk the horn here, but we're fortunate to have a very receptive and responsive police department here in Bloomington. And I have a hard time believing that people, after they have a question, it's not answered when they call that general number. And we will work, like I said, the crime prevention unit, we will work to answer that. And if we can't answer it on our level, we will steer you where you need to go, or we'll get the answer for you. Look, we have a vested interest in this place working as well, okay? We have to go out and we have to answer to you folks, and we've got to field the phone calls. And if the citizens are not happy because of something that's going on, it makes our job that much tougher. So start with the police department. Again, I can't answer your first part of your question. I'll pass the mic, but start with us. We will steer you where you need to go to get that question answered about, again, start, and we'll do everything we can to get you headed in the right direction and take care of it.
I unfortunately can't answer your question regarding the number of police calls and was that considered, because we weren't the direct placing agency. We were not the we're not the entity that placed in there. I do, like I said, do support that placement. It's a licensed facility. If it wasn't licensed, that would be another thing. You know what I mean? They have a valid license. It's difficult for us, for community corrections. We can't make promises to people. We can only promise how we'll react if there's a problem, okay? So we're a 24/7 operation. If agents are required to answer their phone from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., after hours, there's a number on their phone to call for after hours. That number rings 24/7. I often answer it, so I get up at 3 in the morning to take a call, and there's a 24/7 officer of the day for Department of Corrections to issue a warrant. And obviously it seems like there's a pretty good agreement that Bloomington PD does a really good job of being responsive as well. So although I can't predict or prevent certain behaviors by anyone in the community, I can only promise our level of responsiveness, if that helps.
Over here. Hi. Say, first of all, commendable job. I'm the son of a community corrections officer family duo, and I wouldn't want your job. Secondly, there is no good option in these cases, and I understand that. So we also have to be respectful that if it's not our community, it's another community's. So I appreciate where you're coming from on that. Two things. One, and not to focus on this, again, to your point of this one gentleman, has he, and again, not to violate law, I understand his technical reasons for being returned to prison for a period of time. And I guess my question is, has he ever been considered since '92 in any other cases reflective of what he was charged and originally convicted for?
So the question is, has he been considered in any other potential sex offense cases? Is that, yep, not that I'm aware of, no. Nope. And we have the entire file available, so there is no other charges, no other reports of sexual behavior, criminal sexual behavior.
All right, I think what we're going to do here, folks, is we went over our time here, but we're not going anywhere. We're all going to be here. Everyone that you see in a uniform, Detective George Harm, Sergeant Marty Early, are all going to be here. So I encourage you to have discussions with them, any questions that you might have. I just want to say just a couple of things. I want to thank the church facility here very, very much for allowing us to have this community meeting. Thank our representatives from Hennepin Probation, Department of Corrections, and our panel. And also this, too. We have 118 dedicated police officers that work every day for you. And I'll tell you what, every single one of them knows this address. They know what this person looks like. They know all of that necessary information. We're not going away. We're going to be there. We're going to be frequent flyers in that neighborhood, get used to it, wave a lot, and have those good conversations. So with that, don't forget to sign up for our Neighborhood Watch and our community notification system, our Everbridge system. So thank you all very, very much for attending.